Less than 2 months to go for the big presidential elections. The racism versus law enforcement debate has split the U.S. political discourse right down the middle. After months of Black Lives Matter protests across the country, most of which have been described as lawlessness and arson by President Trump, now large rallies are being carried out across several cities in support of the American president. Now, hundreds of Trump supporters gathered in a small town south of Portland, which has been witnessing relentless protests for months, has also seen some violent clashes between the Black Lives Matter protesters and certain far-right white supremacist groups. Now, Oregon's largest city has seen over 100 days of straight-out protests, including one standoff last month in which a far-right activist was shot dead, and the man suspected in the killing was later fatally shot as the police moved in to arrest him. Now, earlier on Monday, the Black Lives Matter activists clashed with the Trump supporters at the pro-Trump rally in Salem, with the police making several arrests. The pro-Trump vehicle rally saw groups of armed men in paramilitary gear amongst the crowd that included families and older people. The parade was decked out with U.S. flags, Trump banners and also signs that read, "Keep America First." The scores of Trump supporters had gathered outside the state capitol building in Oregon to show their support for the U.S. president as he bids for a second term in the White House. Ironically, the pro-Trump rally, which called for upholding American values, had participants who slammed Portland protests, calling the site as resembling a third world country.
When you look at the destruction that's happening, downtown Portland looks like a third world country with all of the graffiti and the burning and the looting and all of that. And that's happening in cities all across the United States.
The almost all-white rally was a ringing endorsement of President Trump's stance on the protests. The city was under siege by thugs engaged in domestic terrorism is how Donald Trump has been describing the Black Lives Matter protests. The pictures from Oregon indicate that the traditional Trump support base remains solidly behind the president despite the fault lines that have emerged in the American society. But the question, of course, is, will this support for Trump be good enough to make him return to the White House once the elections are done? Now, several polls indicate that the Democrat candidate, Joe Biden's lead over Trump, has remained pretty steady over the last few weeks. And despite the growing polarization amongst the electorate, Trump will still need a significant swing to repeat his 2016 performance.